because you were the only out of the 100 senators, there was one who didn't have a college degree, and that was you.
That was me.
Were you conscious of that when you were in the Senate?
I think everyone else was. I remember one senator, they invited me out to dinner up in Georgetown, and we're sitting there. And he was a very good guy. And he's talking to me, kind of telling me how it works. Then he pointed to the wall, and there was someone in a painting. And he says, "That's my great-grandfather. He went to name some college." I remember. I'm thinking, oh, he's trying to tell me something here. And I thought, yeah, okay, we'll see. I ended up in 2 years, the third position of leadership of the Senate. A lot of people don't know that. And when I was approached by the leader to be in that position, of course I said, yes, why not? And I knew who I overlapped, and I knew they wouldn't be happy. Oddly enough, it was the one that took me to dinner.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today, our guest is former US Senator Mark Begich, born in Anchorage to, at the time, Alaska State Senator Nick Begich, who would go on to become US House Rep in 1970 and whose plane would disappear in 1972. Mark opened the Mother Lode nightclub when he was 16 years old. He was appointed to the Youth Commission by Mayor George Sullivan in 1980 and served in Mayor Tony Knowles' administration. Mark did all of that before being elected to the Anchorage Assembly at age 26, the youngest ever to serve on that body. He was sworn in as mayor of Anchorage on July 1st, 2003, and elected to the US Senate in 2008, defeating Senator Ted Stevens. Senator Mark Begich, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. And in Juneau on a sunny day, no snow falling, no rain.
That's
no
amazing.
Wind.
You know who doesn't know if it's sunny outside?
It's you guys.
Yeah.
Because you're in a room that looks out to a garage.
Exactly. I'm really glad that you're here. And I feel bad that I'm just now getting you on. So very happy to have you on. Your son and your brother have been on the podcast.
Oh, great. Excellent. Yeah. Fantastic.
You were the first Anchorage mayor who was born and raised in Anchorage.
Yes. Yeah. First ever. And my first elected position was on the Anchorage Assembly at 26.
Right. And was that the youngest?
The youngest.
I know
Dave
that
Walsh and I compete a little bit on that. I think he might be first and I might be second, but no one's ever told me otherwise. Mm-hmm. So claim your territory.
I get confused in my mind because the Charter Commission had Lisa Parker was like 19.
Yeah, but it was a municipality.
Correct. Yeah. And Jane Anvik was 26. Right. I think so.
And matter of fact, and Lisa's vice mayor of Soldotna.
Yes.
And if you haven't interviewed her, you should.
I have.
Oh,
she's great to interview.
Tons of knowledge.
We talked about issues related to Anchorage.
Yeah.
Which is, been an ongoing debate over the past couple of years about our high property tax rate.
Yep.
And no sales tax.
Right.
And our charter protects Anchorage citizens from a sales tax.
Right.
And it was interesting to have a city council member from Soldotna talking about having various sources of revenue and how Anchorage should do something like that. And I'm like, hey, Lisa, you guys kind of set the table that we weren't going to have a sales tax at Anchorage, and we've been paying for it for 50 years.
50 years. It's an interesting, sales tax has been tried multiple times in Anchorage. I've been party to that more than once, trying to diversify the revenue stream. Anchorage in its, a lot of people have a hard time dealing with it. Anchorage is in the top 10, 15% in property tax rates in the country. And people think, oh, no, we got all this, we don't have a sales tax. Yeah, property taxes, we're in the top level. And we do have to figure out how to fix that problem, because if we don't fix it, there'll be a point where the public says, we're going to fix it. And all you have to do is look back to California when that happened and what it did to their whole economy over time. The services went down. The list went on and on. So you have to really think about this the right way. I do think that, there has been some diversification over the years, between a rental car tax, hotel tax, tobacco tax, marijuana tax. Anything you're doing, we're going to, they've been able to figure it out, which has been good in one hand. Then they've done some things. When we sold the telephone utility, those profits went into a trust. But learned lesson from the permanent fund, It was not a dividend to the taxpayers. It was money to offset taxes, which went into the budget. The second thing that happened was the most recent merger of Municipal Light and Power, and that city asset, all those proceeds went into that fund. And there's an income stream that's above the tax that goes to the city. And then the most recent was the alcohol tax, which is for new services, because the way that law was crafted was the year it passed, you couldn't go back and fill the gap. This was for new services that people were demanding. So you wouldn't get a loss in the system. And there was a little tension on that from people, that why, we need this to deal with our current budget. And everyone kind of agreed, but the voter said, we want you to do more because we need more, especially around homeless, sexual assault, child abuse, these things that are alcohol related. And that passed, and now it produces about $16 million. But the cost of the city continues to go up because it's not a simple budget, you might say.
Yeah, no, I love the alcohol tax, and
no one notices it. I mean,
truth. And,
yeah.
and that was about the point I was going to make, is that people say that prohibition didn't work.
Okay.
But what prohibition did is it basically doubled the price of alcohol on the black market. And by doubling the prices, that meant that there were lots of folks who drank a lot less. Mm-hmm. And we had less alcohol-related harm in the country when we doubled the price of alcohol,
yep.
So we don't need to do prohibition again.
Right.
But what we can do is taxes that disincentivize the drinking of alcohol.
Right. Well, it's like tobacco, right?
Exactly.
When we were debating that, I was mayor. Alan Teshi, when he was alive, was on the assembly downtown, represented downtown. And I'll never forget this day. I was coming down Benson Boulevard near Alan Peterson's, right there where New Seward Highway is, and I was parked in the traffic light. I look over, and I see this small car with a baby seat in the back with a baby, windows rolled up, and the woman smoking. And I literally called on my cell phone. Alan Teshi, we were at 25 cents a pack or something was the tax. I said, go to $1. And he goes, well, I say, if we're going for 25, go to $1.
Yeah, what year was that?
It had to be during my time as mayor, so 2003, 4, 5,
yeah.
right in there.
Uh-huh.
And I said, go to $1. And he goes, why? I said, I'm seeing why we need to go to $1 right now in real time. And it passed. And it's gone up since. But I mean, the fact is, when you see that behavior, and the victim was not some degree the smoker, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. It was a kid in the back who had no 100%. Control out of that environment.
Was having to breathe that air. Yeah. And this is interesting, and I would love to talk about this with you, because it seems to me, when I think about alcohol tax and raising the alcohol tax, I think about wealthy people who drink nice wine every night.
Right.
And that's who we're putting that tax on. And then when I think about smokers, I tend to think about lower income folks who tend to be smokers.
Right.
And so for me, I always get a little hesitant about...
Tobacco says one thing on the product, the only product that we sell in this country that's used by people. It says, this will kill you. Have you ever seen the advertisement in Europe?
Yeah.
It's bold.
Well,
But I hear what you're saying.
I'll tell you a little something about our office. We did get a bill through last year that changed the signage at all points of sale of alcohol in the state. It is a sign that now says that alcohol can cause cancer, including colon and breast cancer. And we did it. It was the best we could do. Yeah. If we could put that on every bottle of beer, every bottle of wine, we would. It's very tricky in a smaller market like Alaska.
Right. That's right.
But we can change the sign that is produced by the state and sent out to the business and hung on the wall. Yeah. And that's what we did. And the point is that if we can get everybody
risk of what you're doing
to drink one less beverage.
But wait a second, I'm in the bar and restaurant business. Don't hurt me too hard.
No, it doesn't hurt you. Though.
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you.
Yeah. Although there was pushback. They didn't want me to name a specific cancer. But the truth is, we have a very high rate of colon cancer in Alaska. Okay. This is a real, I wanted to put something on there where people know somebody who's had this cancer.
Right, and connect. And the fact is, if you look at the liquor industry today, mocktails, which I never understand this business model. I mean, I like the business model because here's what. I sell you a mocktail, non-alcoholic, old days, Shirley Temple, but mocktail.
Right.
And I sell the next person a cocktail, the price is about the same.
Yep.
The difference is I don't put alcohol in here, so I got a lower cost in the mocktail. So I want you to drink the mocktail.
Exactly.
And what's happening, I know with our bartenders at the hotel, at the Crimson, is they are, I mean, it's wild, these mocktails. I mean, they're just, they're almost, fruity drinks and whatever.
Right.
I don't drink any of that hard liquor stuff. So, but I'm just watching it. And it's changing the industry. The younger people, Generation Z and X, drink less. That's what's happening. And, if you took tobacco and went back years and where you are today, less younger people smoke. Price sensitive, definitely price sensitive. Alcohol is price sensitive to a certain degree because the people that you described, if they're going to buy a $20 glass of wine, they're buying a $20 glass of wine. It could be a 40% tax on it.
Exactly.
It's a different caliber of buyer.
Right.
But you're going to get people in the mid-range that maybe have one less. And there's a combination. Put the cancers and all the other, one less potential DUI on the road.
Exactly.
One that is, people, it's probably harsh, but if you're going to, I always say this about people with tobacco, if you're going to inhale that, that's your business. And if you want to kill yourself, that's you. But when you do secondhand smoke, now you're influencing other people. And that is not acceptable. Do I want people to take a product and create cancer? No. But you can only give, you're like wanting to give advice, you have policy, and then people can make individual choices. But if it starts to impact my life, your life, a kid's life, now we have a different conversation. Now it's public health.
100%.
Now we're going to have a different way we're going to deal with these
Public
issues.
health has the biggest bang for its buck, and we underinvest in
Totally
public health
underinvest.
year after year.
When I was in the Senate, we worked on Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, prevention. I remember, prevention is like everyone talks about it. So we send this pack of bills, the amendments we want to do, to the Congressional Budget Office. So they do an analysis. What does it save? What does it cost? Kind of like when you have to get a fiscal note here in Juneau, right? And so we were thinking, prevention, you could figure that out. That's billions in savings. They came back with all our amendments, less than a couple hundred million, because it's hard to determine what prevention can do. And I'm thinking, what? And this is because the way they do the budget counting, it's on actual facts and numbers they prevented. Like let's say you produce 10 less cars, well, then there's 10 less cars. But it's hard to show because we did this, you didn't get colon cancer, right? But the fact is, statistically, we know there's been decreases when you have preventive. If I came in here and said, I'm going to do preventive maintenance on your furnace every year, you'd say, thank you. And guess what? We get longer life out of it. Frankly, we are like a boiler, right? We got to get maintenance all the time.
It's like the fact that law enforcement doesn't get credit for the crimes that were not committed.
Right.
And yet,
famous movie, I can't remember, it was, they could predict the crimes before they happen.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to measure it, right? But the fact is, education, this, and that's when you think about preschool, absolutely has impact. Health, absolutely has impact. Getting people to understand the impacts of violence and crime and what you can do to prevent that, has impact. Right. But sometimes the bean counters go, well, I don't know how we measure that. We can get no credit in the bill for that. So some of the amendments didn't pass because they're, it's not really monetary valuable. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it.
Hey, let's bounce way back.
Yeah.
So you born in Anchorage in 62, went to Stellar.
Born on Northern Lights in Boniface off of East 24th when the Holiday store there, which is now the Circle K, which used to be the Quick Stop. And before that.
And they have like a burrito shop inside there now.
Yes.
That's kind of popular.
That's the Chevron. It used to be Sandy's Chevron. The road ended, both roads, Northern Lights and Boniface, ended at that T. And right there was a log cabin. And this is not a made up story. Miss Brisky ran it. It was a kindergarten class. And that's where I walked to school.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty
That's
wild.
my district.
There we go. It used to be an old log cabin there. And the big store that opened up was Bilo. That was where the Value Village is now. You go with Bilo bucks and get little stickers and get free things after you accumulated enough. But yeah, I was born there. Then I went to Stellar. I went to Lake Otis, Nunaka Valley, Lake Otis, Nunaka, which is now closing, which I would say
Well, repurposed.
They have 15 acres there. I would encourage people to think about housing. That's a great parcel of land next to a beautiful park. A lot of multi-use there. Then I went to Lake Otis for a little bit, then Stellar. In its first year, it was established. It was a condemned school.
And
Literally, it was chained up. 150 kids and parents.
And you're the third child?
We were 6 of us. So it's Nick, my brother, Nichelle, Tom, then me,
So you're
then
fourth.
Paul, or Stephanie, then Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're fourth.
Fourth, yeah. People say, are you the middle child in this? You can't get a middle even.
I mean, a lot of middle kids. Well, what do you remember? Your father's plane disappeared when you were 10. What do you remember about your life prior to age 10?
We played kick the can, an old Folgers can, literally, coffee can, which if I said that to my son today, he'd say, what, a can? What does it mean? He said, in a plastic Ziploc vacuum seal. No, it was a can. And then you play kick the can with these sticks. Remember, it's the simplest game. Kick that can, pick up 6, everyone runs. And then you got to find them. It walked to school in Nunaka Valley. Boniface was a 2-lane road, so it was safe. My parents built a couple apartment buildings there. In those days, your front door, think about this, your front door was a hollow core door. No dimple, just a regular handle lock. I mean, basically, you could push the door open if you wanted to. I remember as a kid, I was had to be at that point 9, I think I did it, or maybe 8, but 9 or 8. I had ordered this box of seeds that you could sell door to door, which I did, and Christmas cards. And when my brothers sold these, make a little money. And I remember the nights when the washing machines at the apartments, we had to unload the coins and count them. And think about it, in those days, they were silver coins, quarters. And I think today we would have kept all those. Oh my God. But we would stack them, roll them, do things like that. My dad served down here. And I remember as a kid coming down here one time, and there was a stamp store down here. I got interested back then in collecting stamps. But I remember coming to Juneau, and all I remember was this place had a lot of hills, because in East Anchorage, it's pretty flat unless you go up and stuck again, right? So it was like, wow, man, and you had to walk them, right? You didn't look at them. You had to actually walk up them and walk down them. So, that was my very first as a kid coming to Juneau. Big group of us, 6 kids. That's a lot of activity. The thing I hated the most now, looking back, was we all had matching Christmas pajamas at Christmas with a photo. The other thing my mom did, she hand-addressed, think about this, hand-addressed, and we all participated in our Christmas card send out. And it used to be this dog sled with all of us with fur husky jackets on. And when you look back, the huskies grew, there's 4 or 5, then there's 6, because it was us, all those kids. So it was you remember all these things. And I remember building snow forts in our front yard because the snow was so deep. Not like it is now. It's different from that perspective.
And do you remember moving to DC?
Yeah, I remember as a kid because the house had a pool. And it was a model home. So it had the garage, it's off, the real estate office for the neighborhood, because we needed as many rooms as we could get. And so they were going to convert it back to the garage, and they didn't do it. They said, no, we could use that as a family room, right? A TV room. And then my dad's little office. And he had this thing. It was a gift, might have been from Cody. I can't remember exactly, but it was a king crab, on a big wall mount. And I remember the day we broke it because we were doing what we should do, kicking a ball in the house, and it hit that thing fell down, the crab leg broke. And it was a gift to him from some group. And I'm thinking, oh my God. But yeah, no, we had a great time. We would walk to Churchill School there in Langley. Those are the high school, junior high, and I went to Churchill Elementary School. In those days, it was McLean, Virginia, very small. Now it's massive. Tyson Corner is a mass. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And you could walk to these places and safe, never worried about anything. And as kids, we were just kind of, we didn't, like now when my son was growing up, I think Deborah and I were maybe too overprotective. Like, where are you going? What are you doing? And maybe my mom was doing that, my dad, and we didn't know it, which is likely, but it was a great place. I remember going to the Longworth building where my dad's office was, and you got to sit in these offices and see all these people working, and these whole, think about the size of it was much smaller, and you're in these big cavernous hallways of marble, and it was pretty amazing place to be.
So I did not re-listen to your brother Tom's podcast episode, but we talked about when the plane went missing. Did y'all move back to Anchorage?
Not like instantaneously. There was kind of a couple phases. One was stayed in D.C. And I remember, for example, Nixon was president. I remember as a kid, the president calling and talking to my mom. So we were there for some time. But then we did come back to Alaska. But we came back, first we had to come back for the memorial service. And that was at East High. And I remember we were staying at one of our apartments. It was a 2-bedroom apartment with all of us just smashed in there for this activity. Then not long after that, we came back. Yeah.
It must have been bizarre to come home from your father's memorial service and then go back to D.C. to finish the school year.
Yeah, it was, I wouldn't say it was too odd. As a kid, you kind of just you fumble along with what's going on. And I think coming back, being integrated back into Anchorage, because we would drive usually to Minnesota in the summer from Anchorage there or from D.C. over for Minnesota. All our cousins were there. So for me, it wasn't like, wow, this is radically different, because we, in the reality of it, I had good friends there, even though I was only there a couple of years, friends that I hung out with, and moving, it was almost like a rebirth or a restart in a way, because there was traumatic activity in the house during that time in DC. And so coming back, moving into a new house, new neighborhood, not in where we lived for all my life in East Anchorage off East 24th, but moving to, a different space.
So when you got back to Anchorage, you were going into 5th or 6th grade?
5th grade, 6th grade, yeah. It was these new programs they're called pods.
Oh.
So you were mixed. And it was over at Lake Otis, and it was these weird open concept. It's kind of the 70s thing. Yeah. But you were 5th and 6th grade, so you could move into different class levels. I was very good at math, so I was in 6th grade math.
Well, it wasn't long until you got your business license when you were 16?
14, actually.
14.
Yeah.
So, really lightning speed.
Yeah.
Where did you have the model of being a businessman that young?
In D.C., I remember I wanted to buy a bike, and it was $170 or so, because I wanted a good bike. Back then, that's a lot of money. So I put together an idea in the neighborhood. I created this little bit carnival that I did, and people could buy tickets and whatever. And I raised some money. I said, well, that wasn't that hard. That was pretty easy. And then when I came back, where it really started was when I went from elementary, obviously over to Stellar at that point. And there was a program called Cooperative Work Experience or something. And my brother Nick had a small little jewelry store. So I went to work there. And I thought, learned silversmithing, which I learned. That was one of my trades. And I thought, oh, this isn't that hard. And I started looking at things like there were some flea markets. I thought, hey, if I make some jewelry, and in those days you buy a 10 by 10 flea market space for $30 for the weekend. And I thought, okay, I had $30. So 10 of these things, I'll make money. And I didn't really value my time, right? Because I just, get me out of trouble. And I was in this environment. And over time, I just started doing more because I was making money. Because then I wanted to buy my own car. I didn't want a used car. I wanted a new car. And back then, it was, I don't know, $3,600. It was a Sunbird, Pontiac Sunbird. And I wanted that car. And so I figured out, okay, what do I got to do? So I started making jewelry. Back in those days, there was a big fad at one point for puka shells in Hawaii that came to the U.S. in the mainland. And I started buying those wholesale, selling. It was just one thing led to the next. And I remember one day I was over in the University Mall, when it was a mall, not like it is now. And there was a homework store in there. And they had these, I call them tin art, but it was very interesting stuff. Pencil sharpeners, big wall mounts. And I said, And I looked where they were displayed. I said, God, no excuses. But then I was watching people. Like, oh, and then when they kind of like discovered them in the place, they were, oh, what is that? Man, those are displayed better. I wonder if it could sell. But I looked at the packaging and it said, made in Japan or made in China or wherever. And where do they buy these? So I actually told this story recently at UAA. I went out to the dumpster at the back of the building and I dug around and found a cardboard box with a whole bunch of different cardboard boxes with like import, blah, blah, blah. So I grabbed them. Remember, we didn't have internet or nothing. So you had to go down to the library to these books that all the businesses in the world kind of listed. And I would look up these companies, send them a letter, see if I could get a catalog. And they'd send them. I'd get these catalogs. Oh, this is the metal I wanted. So then I started selling that and doing very well. I bought my car. The motivation was I wanted something.
Was your oldest brother, Nick, your business mentor?
To some degree, I think Nick, everyone I kind of watched. I mean, Nick was doing the jewelry business, and I thought if he could do it, I could do it. Why not? And I really spent a lot of time at the library. I wanted to learn, how does this work? And,
So you're doing this in high school?
In high school.
Yeah.
And Audrey Mason.
Self-study.
Self-study. Audrey Mason, my math teacher, ran the cooperative experience. I told her this is what I want to do. I want to make jewelry and I want to sell it. And she was like, well, okay. And she did part-time real estate. And she thought, well, this is kind of interesting, little innovator here. And that's what I did. And part of it was, I'd go out, do research at the old Luzak library. You'd go in. I mean, literally these books were like yellow pages for businesses. And you'd have to go through by product and manufacturing.
Well, and your parents had built the apartment complexes.
Yes.
So there was some real estate history.
Yeah, but I wasn't, at that point, not fully.
No, I'm just saying, when you mentioned that your teacher also did some real estate work.
Yeah, exactly. But I did learn, I went and ended up at 16, I think it was, I moved out and ran the apartments for my mom. So I started doing that. Then I opened a teenage nightclub.
Right, you did. You opened the Mother Lode.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you did that?
16.
Were you like a wonder kid? Like, were people like,
no,
how is this guy doing this?
No, I was an average student. I didn't go to college.
I know. Well, I wanted to talk about that because you were the only out of the 100 senators. There was one who didn't have a college degree, and that was you.
That was me.
Were you conscious of that when you were in the Senate?
I think everyone else was. I remember one senator, they invited me out to dinner up in Georgetown, and we're sitting there, and he's a very good guy, and he's talking to me, kind of telling me how it works. Then he pointed to the wall, and there was someone in a painting. He says, that's my great-grandfather. He went to name some college. I remember. I'm thinking, oh, he's trying to tell me something here. And I thought, yeah, okay, we'll see. And the funny thing about the Senate, a lot of people don't realize a couple of things that really, when you think about that, I ended up in 2 years, the third position of leadership of the Senate. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people didn't realize that. And Alaskans were like, how could that be? Well, because they wanted me to. I overstepped a bunch of people, not by me, on my choice. I was recruited to do that. In other words, I never asked for it. And I also chaired the Post-Secondary Education Commission and the Student Loan Corporation for 7 years.
Well, I just interviewed your senior senator from when you were in the Senate.
Oh.
Lisa Murkowski.
Yeah.
And she talked about her first couple of years as being discounted because she'd been appointed by her father.
Yeah.
And lack of respect, like literally people ignoring her.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't earned her seat.
Yeah, earned her.
And so I'm just curious if you felt that you had to prove yourself for not having a college degree, that you felt that there were people disrespecting you because you
No, I think a couple were perplexed that I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't this, wasn't that. But I have to say, my colleagues within 2 years, when they wanted me to be in that position, it wasn't my selection. And I had no interest in that. I was doing my thing. And when I was approached by the leader to be in that position, of course I said, yes, why not? And I knew who I overlapped, and I knew they wouldn't be happy. Oddly enough, it was the one that took me to dinner. So how things work in the world, right? But more importantly, I think what triggered it was in my first year, the Senate has a retreat every year. The Democrats and the Republicans each have their own retreat and do their whatevers. And so I went to the first one. And, I think about a retreat, you're planning strategy, you're figuring out what the agenda is, and it's all this seminar kind of lecturing. And I remember after that, I went to the leader Remember, I was at that point, it was a February retreat. I just got elected. So I was 2 months in. And about a week after I went to the leader, I said, Mr. Leader, I appreciate the retreats. I think you're good, but I'm not going to the next one. I said, I want to know strategy. What are we doing? What's our goal? What's our vision? How are we going to change the world? That's what I came here to do. And then about a few weeks later, I get this senator comes up to me, Dorgan, and says, hey, I understand you had some questions about the retreat. And I said, well, I do. And he says, well, you're not going to be planning it with me, according to Senator Reid. And I said, oh, okay, great. And then one day I'm walking down the hall and here comes Senator Inouye. And I called him Yoda because he'd walk slow, had a cane. And he grabs my arm, kind of puts it and says, so what do you know about China? And I said, well, they're the second largest trading partner for Alaska. Okay. And then he walks away. My chief of staff a few weeks later comes over and says, hey, did you know we just got a call? You're going to chair the China Parliamentarian Committee. I said, what? And he says, yeah. Did you ask for that? And I said, no. Then I paused it. Oh, wait. And what was happening, because I was not afraid to say what I believed, and I also was about doing stuff. And I think what happened is some of the leadership were saying, well, wait a second, maybe that young Turk, we should bring him in because he has no barriers.
Right.
It's kind of like Mikey with the light commercial. Let him try it. And once I elevated to leadership, I sat in those meetings with Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and Patty Murray. And so I actually wore it in a different way. I said, hey, I'm a big believer in education. That's why I chaired the post-secondary education committee. That's why we turned the Student Loan Corporation around. I made sure our family's finances were in a position that every kid in our family could go to school and whatever they wanted to do. We made sure of that. And so when I went there, I wore that more as a badge. Like, this is what I did. And the best one was Larry King on a show one day. I wasn't on it. Someone sent me it. And they said something, blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember an exact quote, but it was something like this. Because there was this little thing about education or something. And he says, well, he seemed to got there without an education in college. So it seems like he's doing something right. Maybe that's what you need. And Larry King, and someone says to me, no, and I go, what? How did I get in the middle of that one? And I think people may look at these things as deficits. I look at them as it's an experience, different. And you bring them.
Well, in a way, you got a lot of attention for not having that degree. It
Absolutely.
kind of
the credentials.
Yeah, it's kind of what you're famous for. Like, you're not going to go get a college degree once you become famous as doing all this stuff without one.
And you're already getting experience. I mean, the businesses that I've done that have been successful and great, the ones that haven't been, that's my college degree expense.
Right.
I paid that bill multiple times.
We're getting towards the end of our time, but I want to bounce back and talk about, you're sort of this very young businessman.
Yeah.
And you decided to run for Assembly when you were 26. What was...
Why?
Yeah.
Because the guy who was there, nice guy. But I'm sitting there in a 2-bedroom apartment. I paid $300 for. I got a roommate because I can't even afford it.
East Anchorage.
He's Muldoon, 6th Avenue, behind a gas station. Not even a gas station. They pretended it was. It was really like a chop shop or something. I don't know. I was on a dirt road, right on Muldoon, right by Arby's there.
Yep.
And I'm like, what? Can they fix this road? Can anybody fix this road here? And I'm playing poker with some of my friends. And they said, why don't you run for that thing? That local government thing. And I said, and I was the least likely in my family to ever do politics. And I think subconsciously I blocked it out. When, you lose your dad at 10, why would you want to do that? That business, right?
Well, I mean, I hear that from your perspective. I would say from your friend's perspective, and I think this is like something that your whole family carries with you, is everyone knows the story of your dad. And so I feel like I would imagine all 6 kids would get from random people at random times. Yeah. Like, why are you going to run for office?
Yeah, I never, people knew I liked business, and that's what I did. And I think that was my place to go, that I felt. Because I looked at that, and I look back and I think, that business, politics, took my dad. Why would I do that? So I go into this other world, and Tom and Nick were more likely. And I remember actually Daily News did an article, all 3 of us, never published it. And it was on this element. They never published it. And it was interesting.
Why do you think they never published it?
I don't know. It's a great question. And Tom, we all got interviewed. And I can't remember the woman's name. She used to be a professor at UA too. And so
she was a reporter.
Yeah.
And she did a story on the 3 of you.
Yeah.
And never posed.
In the day when there was competition, and so it was very, never understood why I never appeared. But I got agitated. So I would call this assembly member up, say, I'm a voter. How do I do this? Well, you're complicated. It's just a road, So then I said, screw it, I'm going to run. And I ran in a district at that time, had no Democrat represented in any layer of government. Ramona Barnes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all Republican.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm running. And we got out there with this ragtag team. I remember going to the teachers union. They wouldn't endorse me, even though my family was almost everyone in education, because they had someone who they liked.
Yeah.
Beside the fact that his kids went to private school, put that aside. And I said, okay. But then teachers got mad, some of my friends, and they said, we're going to help you. And Leslie Van de Gaw, Leslie Rydell, these guys came and said, we're going to help you. Nina, Benito, Romine. And so they came aboard. Then my poker friends, play cards with me. We'll do the signs. It was really like this grassroots, this Republican friend of mine who was working at B-Mark, a school pal of mine. He did the counting on index cards, keep track of them. It was crazy. And we won. And I served all those years on the Assembly, and guess what happened? Never got the road paved. Why? Because I lived on the road.
Oh, so it was going to look like...
Oh, I can't do that.
It was bad optics.
But I loved serving because the things you can do. But I always believe this, doesn't matter what you do, in an elected office, or like I'm out of it now, public service is what you do. The vehicle you choose can vary. And can be multiple vehicles, working in the legislature, doing what I do now, or whatever. So that's what got me. I was agitated.
Hey, last question. How did you and Deb meet?
We met at a park dedication. Johnny Ellis. She worked for Johnny Ellis. And I was working for Tony Knowles when he was mayor. And I've got to tell you this story. I was working at a jewelry store. Great job. Think about this. 1980, approximately, making $10 an hour. Think about that.
So we're 18 years old.
18. Think about that. $10 an hour, underground parking, full health care paid, 50% off anything I wanted to buy in the store. That is an unbelievable job. They wanted me to work. I became a manager. And then this little ad showed up. George Sullivan was mayor, youth commission. And I thought, I'm a youth. And we had just closed the teen club. So I know stuff about this. And then he appoints me. And then time goes on. Tony Knowles runs for mayor, competitive race, blah, blah, blah. He wins. And then there's a job that opens up called youth programs coordinator. It's so low on the totem pole, you can't even find it in the ratings and the rankings. But I said, I'll apply for that. I applied, failed the typing test twice, because in those days, you had to type. Wasn't full computers yet, daisy wheels, word processor. So I then quickly did my thing. I learned how to memorize. We got the interview, did my thing. Worked for 2 years in the department, sending people up to the mayor's open door, complaining about everything, sending the commission up. I got called to the mayor's office. And, I'm 20. I'm getting fired. It's a Friday. It's all bad now. Go up. Tony Knowles there as chief of staff. And I'm like, I'm going to get fired because I've been harassing with these commissions I monitor. And he says, do you want to work up here? And I'm thinking, okay, elections are in October that year. He's 22 points behind Tom Fink. Said, I'm 20 years old. I could work for the mayor of Anchorage for at least 10 months. This will be a great experience. Boom. And I ended up in that situation. In that process, I was his body guy everywhere he went, almost all the time. And I met Deborah at a park dedication in Government Hill. Johnny Ellis was she worked for him, colder than hell out there. It was the Nightingale, I think it was.
Oh my gosh, because I just had John McKay on the podcast.
Oh my God.
So this was to dedicate to his wife.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
So we were up there and they had some conversation, and my brother, but not
Susan Nightingale.
Yep. And she worked for Daily News. Yeah. And back in the day, Tom said to Deborah, because he worked with her down here, says, oh, someday you got to meet my brother and go dancing with him. You'll love him and you guys are going to get married. I didn't know that story, but Deborah knew it. I ended up meeting her at that park and then went out and here we are.
That's a great
35
story.
35 years later.
It's a perfect end to this podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We got to do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akhlife.gov or call 907-465-4940.